Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate 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 Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Tato Jayamudiraye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, whose praise with transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, entitled Creation, Chapter 7, The Son of Drona Punished, text number 45. Saesha Bhagavan Dronah Prajarupena Vartate Tasyatmano Ardham Patniyaste Nanavagad Virushaha Kripi Saesha Bhagavan Dronah Prajarupena Vartate Tasyatmano Ardham Patniyaste Nanvagad Virasuhu Kripi Saesha Bhagavan Dronah Prajarupena Vartate Tasyatmano Ardham Patniyaste Nanvagad Virasuhu Kripi
Saesha Bhagavan Dronah Prajarupena Vartate Tasyatmano Ardham Patniyaste Nanvagad Virasu Kripi
Saesha Bhagavan Dronah Prajarupena Vartate Tasyatmano Ardham Patniyaste Nanvagad Virasu Kripi
Saesha Bhagavan Dronah Prajarupena Vartate Tasyatmano Ardham Patniyaste Nanvagad Virasu Kripi. Mataji. Saesha Bhagavan Dronah Prajarupena Vartate
Tasyatmano Ardham Patniyaste Nanvagad Virasuh Kripi.
Anybody online?
Sayesha Bhagavan Dronaha Prajarupena Vartate Tasyatmanoraddham Patniyaste Nanvagad Virasu Kripi Sayesha Bhagavan Dronaha Prajarupena Vartate Tasyatmanoraddham Patniyaste Nanvagad Virasu Kripi. Synonyms: Saha, he, Eshaha, certainly, Bhagavan, Lord, Dronaha, Dronacharya, Prajarupena, in the form of his son Aswathama, Vartate, is existing, Tasya, his, Atmanaha, of the body, Ardham, half, Patni, wife, Aste, living, Na, not, Anvagat, undertook, Virasuhu, having the son present, Kripi, the sister of Kripacharya. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: he, Dronacharya, is certainly still existing, being represented by his son. His wife Kripi did not undergo a sati with him because he had a son. Translation with repetition: he, Dronacharya, is certainly still existing, being represented by his son. His wife Kripi did not undergo a sati with him because he had a son. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The wife of Dronacharya, Kripi, is the sister of Kripacharya. A devoted wife whose, according to revealed scripture, is the better half of her husband, is justified in embracing voluntary death along with her husband if she is without issue. But in the case of the wife of Dronacharya, she did not undergo such a trial because she had her son, the representative of her husband. A widow is a widow only in name if there is a son of her husband existing. So in either case, Aswathama was the representative of Dronacharya, and therefore killing Aswathama would be like killing Dronacharya. That was the argument of Draupadi against the killing of Aswathama. Thus ends the wonderful transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Umagyanatimirandhasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So in this section of Srimad Bhagavatam, where we are seeing the title of this chapter itself is Son of Drona Punished. And we are in an interesting phase of this story which has developed so far, where we have seen that there is a Brahmastra which has been released by Aswathama to please his master Duryodhan. Apparently Duryodhan was not pleased with that. And then Krishna instructs Krishna instructs Arjuna that you also should release a you should also release a Brahmastra to counteract this Brahmastra released by Aswathama. Arjuna follows. And then Krishna says you should capture him. Of course, there is a promise which Arjuna has made to Draupadi that I will bring the beheaded head of Aswathama, and you can take bath on standing on that head. So when all these things have happened because Aswathama has killed the 5 sons of Draupadi, right? So all this is going on, and Krishna asks Arjuna to capture Aswathama, and Arjuna has been captured. Now Krishna is asking Arjuna to kill Aswathama, and apparently this is a test. Sometimes Krishna is telling you counteract, Arjuna is acting. Sometimes Krishna is telling you capture him, Arjuna is doing that. But sometimes right now, where Arjuna is being asked by Krishna to kill Aswathama, Arjuna is not doing. He has been brought before Draupadi, and this verse is spoken by Draupadi. So what is happening in this verse? We've been seeing this series of verses. This verse talks about Draupadi's reason or rationale for not killing Aswathama. Even though earlier it was mentioned in one of the verses, it is because of her Bhama Swabhava, because of her womanly nature, she was showing compassion. But in this verse, she is bringing out some more reasons as to why she is feeling or thinking that Aswathama should not be killed. And we will see that. Interestingly, the perspective which Srimad Bhagavatam brings is very powerful. That is why, without any exaggeration, in Bhagavatam itself it is mentioned, Puranarko adhunoditaha. Krishne sodhama upagate dharma jnanadhibhi saha kalau nashta drishamesa puranarko adhunoditaha. When the sun rises in the eastern horizon, then we can see the sun, we can see ourselves, we can also see all others. Similarly, when we take the help of Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna, who's like the sun, we can see the sun, we can see ourselves, we can see others also in relationship with Krishna. Without the presence of the sun, we can't see all these 3 things. That's why it is mentioned Puranarko adhunoditaha. These are not hyperboles, these are not exaggerations. Actually, the decisions that we make in our life, it can be clouded by so many things because we don't understand who the real Lord is, who we are, what is self-realization, who are other people in relation to us. It's only when we see from the eyes of the scriptures that we get a good perspective. So let us see this verse and understand what is it mentioned here. Very beautiful verse, very wonderful use of some of the words, and we can get to understand the mood of this verse. So who is speaking this verse? Very good. So Draupadi is speaking, and what is he saying? Sa esha Bhagavan Dronaha. We all know how emphatic Prabhupada becomes when the word Bhagavan is used, because in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna begins to speak, it is mentioned Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. And Prabhupada goes on to say, Bhagavan is not a cheap thing. A person who possesses the 6 opulences simultaneously in fullness is considered to be Bhagavan. However, the word Bhagavan is used for extraordinary people. And in this case, it is used for Dronacharya. There are mentions of the word Bhagavan being used for other personalities in Bhagavatam as well, not referring to the Supreme Lord, like Bhagavan Naradaha. Narada Muni is considered to be a Bhagavan. Here, Draupadi is addressing Dronacharya as Bhagavan because we sing the song every day in the morning where we worship the spiritual master as good as God. Which line? Sakshad Haritvena Samasta Sastrer. The spiritual master is to be worshipped as good as Hari. Sakshad Haritvena. So here Dronacharya is being addressed as Bhagavan by Draupadi. Sa esha Bhagavan Dronaha. Praja Rupena Vartate. The word Ja means who's born. Praja Rupena Vartate. So Praja is referring to his own son. He is telling, Draupadi is telling that Sayesha Bhagavan Dronaha Praja Rupena Vartate. Praja Rupena is referring that, Dronacharya is still present. Oh Arjuna, you have already killed Dronacharya, but his son is still present. Praja Rupena Vartate. Do you remember where this word Vartate is used in Bhagavad Gita? Vartate is a very interesting word. Vartate Kamakarata. Where is it used? Yasastra Vidhim Utsrujya Vartate Kamakarataha Nasa Siddhim Avapnoti Nasantimna Paramgatihi. That is in the 16th chapter. But there is another place where Vartate is used. Yes. Where? Bandhur Atmanastasya. That verse, can you pull it up? 6.5 or 6.6. Very scary thing in that verse it is mentioned. Bandhur Atmanastasya. Exact verse. I don't want speculation. 6.6. Bandhur Atmatmanastasya Yenatmaivatmana Jitaha Anatmanastu Satrutve Vartate Atmeva Satruvat. That word Vartate is there in that. And if you see that word Vartate in that place, it says remains. Bandhur Atmatmanastasya. Our mind, if it is controlled, it is our best friend. But if the mind is uncontrolled, it remains our worst enemy. Vartate Atmeva Satruvat. So mind you, it remains as your worst enemy if you don't take care of your mind. So here the word is Praja Rupena Vartate. He is continuing to exist. He is existing. Who is continuing to exist? Dronacharya. How is he continuing to exist? Praja Rupena. What does Praja Rupena mean? Means in like your son. He is present in his son, Aswathama. Sayesha Bhagavan Dronaha Praja Rupena Vartate. Tasyatmano ardham patni aste. So the word atmano here, as we all know from the scriptures, can refer to the self, and the self can be body, can be mind, can be the spirit soul. Tasyatmano ardham patni aste. Interestingly, people quote Vedic scriptures saying that the women are not given the due importance or respect. Right? But here, in a marriage, here it is mentioned, Tasyatmano ardham patni aste. Ardham patni means half. In a marriage, there is equal responsibility of husband and wife. And the wife represents half of the life of husband. Atmano ardham. Even though Dronacharya is not present, his half representation is there in the form of Kripi. And he is Praja Rupena Vartate. His son also is present. Atmano ardham patni aste nanvagad virasuhu kripi. If this word is broken down, na anvagat. Anvagat is coming with the root word anu. Anu avagat. So she didn't follow. Anu means to follow. Anu sharan. So you are following in the footsteps of someone. Nanvagad virasuhu kripi. So Kripi, or the wife of Dronacharya, did not follow the footsteps of Dronacharya. When Dronacharya was killed, he did not enter into Sati. He did not become Sati. Nanvagad virasuhu kripi. This is the verse. Sayesha Bhagavan Dronaha Praja Rupena Vartate Tasyatmano ardham patni aste nanvagad virasuhu kripi. He, Dronacharya, is certainly still existing, being represented by his son. His wife Kripi did not undergo a sati with him because she had a son. Now let's understand the words little more. So we have been following this method of active recall, where if you remember some of the questions, probably it will help you recollect the words. But it is only possible if you revisit the words afterwards. So how is Dronacharya still existing? Prajarupena, by his own son. Why did Kripi not undergo sati? Because of her son. Very good. So just to have a recap of the questions that we have been seeing, just few verses before 1.7.42. Who is speaking? This was spoken by Suta Goswami. Who was bound with ropes? How? Guru Putra. How? Like an animal. Pasu Rupena. Why was the person bound silent? He has done heinous activities. Very grievous activity. Very good. Why did Draupadi show respect to the bound man? Bhama Swabhava, because of her womanly nature. Then 1.7.43. Why she could not tolerate that he was bound by rope? Why she could not tolerate? Because she was sati, because she was very devoted lady. And why she could, what she could not tolerate, I read it wrongly. What she could not tolerate that, this Aswathama was bound by ropes. Why she could not tolerate? Because she was sati, she was a very devoted lady. And what action did she recommend? Muchyatam, release him immediately. And the last verse that we had, we spoke about, what did Arjuna learn? Sarahasya dhanurveda, savisargo upasamya yamaha, astragamascha bhavata, shikshito yadanugrahat. Sarahasya. So Arjuna learned the military, the secret, the confidential art of the military art. And throwing arrows. So in Sanskrit, there are two words which are there. One is astra and one is sastra. What is the difference between astra and sastra? Not you. Madhav is active today. Good. What is the difference? No. क्या होता है अस्त्र शस्त्र? Astra is like clothes. Okay, and shastra is like weapons. That's what you're saying. Okay. Bhagavatam Prabhu. Ulta bola. Astra is the one which is thrown and shastra is the one which is held and fought. So he learned the art of throwing these weapons, controlling this. Astra gramascha bhavata shikshito yadanugrahat. What did Arjuna learn? So he learned these two things. How did he learn? Yadanugrahat. Shikshito yadanugrahat. So these are some of the things we have seen. If you go back and refer to these questions, it will help you remember the chapter, what is going on. So taking today's verse further, we are seeing how is Dronacharya still existing and why did Kripi not undergo sati. In the purport, Prabhupada mentioned something which is very striking. The first point I would say. Prabhupada says that a devoted wife who is according to revealed scripture, the better half of her husband, is justified in embracing voluntary death along with her husband if she is without issue. Now, I want to highlight two things in this. The first thing is that a devoted wife is, according to the revealed scripture, the better half of her husband. Not just half of her husband, but the better half of her husband. We don't pay attention to these things, and sometimes something else which is quoted in some other context, people take that and highlight this. But this is also coming in the Vedic scriptures. And Prabhupada is mentioning this in the purport, that a devoted wife who is, according to the revealed scripture, the better half of her husband. Does anybody remember anything where Prabhupada says why women are better than men, especially in Kali Yuga? They are simple-hearted, and if you see any religious ceremonies, or if you see any places where there is scriptural discussion, you will find a lot of women. We had a trip few days back, 2 days yesterday. And if you see the number of participants, there were more women than men. Okay, they are simple-hearted. They are found in large numbers when there is a religious function or ceremony is going on. Is that the only reason why they have to be considered better half of her husband? Very interestingly, these things have to be seen little more closely. I want to bring some highlight of some things from the purports of Srila Prabhupada, there is so I wanted to also highlight in this line another one, voluntary death along with her husband. We'll talk about that. But let's talk about this first point, better half of her husband. There is a very beautiful mention about how the wives are the better halves of the husbands in this particular section of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Diti and Kashyap, they had union in a wrong time, and because of that union there was Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha who were born. So in that connection, there is in the purport, Prabhupada writes this something very powerful. The wife is said to be the commander of the fort, and therefore whenever there is an attack on the body by the senses, it is the wife who protects the body from being smashed. See, this is the in the scenario of a marriage, the role the wife plays is being highlighted by Prabhupada here. The wife is said to be the commander of the fort. Fort is actually the body of a husband, and therefore whenever there is an attack on the body by the senses, it is the wife who protects the body from being smashed. Without a fixed wife, a man becomes a debauchee of the first order and is a nuisance in society, unless he is a trained brahmachari, vanaprastha or sannyasi. And this is a purport where Prabhupada says how a wife plays a big role in a ideal marriage, and how she is considered to be the commander of the fort. Of course, just a side point, that unless he is a trained brahmachari, vanaprastha or sannyasi, and Prabhupada says how somebody can become brahmachari in this Kali Yuga. It is very difficult. So there are two things which are mentioned if somebody wants to take up to this path of brahmachari or follow the vow of brahmacharya, what he should do. Unless there is a rigid and systematic training of the brahmachari by the expert spiritual master. So there has to be a rigid and systematic training. And the second thing is, unless the student is obedient, it is sure that the so-called brahmachari will fall prey to the attack of sex. It's not easy. So that is why, and 99% of the people in this material world, you see, they are married. The role played by a wife in a house, in a grahastha ashram, is a very important one. And that is why she is considered to be the commander of the fort. Elsewhere, if you go further in the description of Puranjana, where we know that allegory, the story which is spoken by Narad Muni, there also it is mentioned, wives are considered to be like a good intelligence. And because of the presence of the good intelligence, Puranjana, the body, does not crave for things, doesn't go hunting outside. Prabhupada uses the word hunting outside, hunting other women. So the role of a wife is very important in a marriage. And in another place, this is Kashyapa Muni saying that as one can cross over the ocean with a sea-going vessel, a man can cross the dangerous ocean of material existence by living with a chaste wife. As one can cross over the ocean with a sea-going vessel, like, with some vessel or something in a sea, maybe you will be able to cross. Similarly, a man can cross the dangerous ocean of material existence by living with a chaste wife. These are instructions from Bhagavatam. So before, we undermine someone or think something that, somebody is inferior, we need to know the proper perspective and see it how the scriptures are talking about the role being played by a wife and the importance. That's why they're considered to be better half of the husband. Voluntary death along with her husband. How many of you think it's a good thing? You know what is voluntary death? Okay, what is it called in the Vedic? Sati. So why sati should be taken? What is the importance of sati? Why should someone get into, voluntarily enter into the pyre, the final funeral pyre? What happens in that? Hmm. Okay. Hmm. Yeah, that's what Arjuna was also telling, right? You know, if all these soldiers die in this battlefield, the women will become widows and they will get corrupted, and there will be adultery in the society, and that will lead to unwanted children, unwanted population, Varna Sankara. That is true. That is the negative aspect of it. If they don't do, then that can happen. There is an exploitation. But there is a positive thing. Why people used to embrace this sati is, as we know in Bhagavad Gita it is mentioned, if somebody dies in a religious war, then Swarga Dwaram Apabrataha. In Bhagavad Gita it is mentioned, if a soldier fights and dies in the battlefield fighting a religious war, for him the doors of heaven become open. So when that person's final pyre is being performed, final rites is being performed, if the wife enters, she also gets this thing in heaven. But moreover, this battle, because Krishna was personally present, anybody who dies looking at Krishna, they will go back to home, back to Godhead. So if not going back to home, back to Godhead, there was at least, you could have gone to heaven. But unfortunately, Kripi chose to stay back, looking at her son. And I mean, it's not a very wise decision in the sense, she being an intelligent lady, the sister of Kripacharya, should have taken sati, but she didn't. But anyway, that is what is mentioned in this verse. The other important thing which is mentioned here is, which is very striking is, and which is very important to remember, is actually how much Draupadi is thinking from the other person's point of view. Right? Despite the fact that her sons are being punished, her sons are being killed brutally when they were weaponless, they were sleeping, they were not even adults, they were not even fighting, being killed. She is still not worried about the right and wrong paradigm, that now he should be punished. She is not looking at in that point of view. She is saying that already, Dronacharya is killed. Why do you want to kill him second time by killing his son? And what will happen to Kripi? The pain that I am going through of having been, my 5 sons being beheaded, why do you want that pain to be inflicted on Kripi? For me, at least, I have got 5 husbands. Kripi doesn't have even her husband. So if her son is also not there, it's a very painful situation. It's a very powerful sense of empathy and compassion that is being exhibited by Draupadi in this case. Because usually the feeling of revenge, or to take some, I have to set right certain things because, something was not done properly, is very strong and very natural in us. But Vaishnava exhibits some qualities like this, where she could empathize the grief that the person will undergo because of her husband's action. In the 4th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, if you read carefully, Narada Muni instructs Dhruva Maharaj in one place that if one is able to deal with the other person properly, if he knows that the person is advanced, he shows him the due respect because he is advanced in his spiritual journey. Or if he is someone who is equal, then he shows friendship. Or if someone who is neophyte, who is beginning the journey, have compassion towards him, then all the material problems in the world can be solved. And one can become free from all material anxieties and material perplexities. Something like this exactly is mentioned by Narad Muni. So it is very important to have this attitude, and it requires a lot of purification within to be able to see someone's pain by getting into his or her shoes, which is being exhibited by Draupadi. But the next important thing which is mentioned here is the particular aspect that the son represents father. And how do we know this? So I've got 2 instances to illustrate this point, how the son represents father. Anybody can guess from this picture? Guess? No, not you. Let's Madhav. It's actually Prataprudra, King Prataprudra, who was trying to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu multiple times. Not just once, many different times. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not willing to meet a pound and ceiling man. He's a king, he is doing materialistic activities. Ha hanta hanta vishabhakshananto. what is that verse? Somebody who's a materialistic man, who's dealing with money and women, a sannyasi should not meet. That is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's principle was, and he was avoiding, despite being coerced and urged by so many of his associates, including Nityananda Prabhu, Swarup Damodar, that Pratap Rudra has been waiting for your mercy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not doing that. But finally, in this scene you can see it is actually King Pratap Rudra's son who gets this opportunity to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sees Pratap Rudra's son, he actually appeared, he was very beautiful, and he appeared as Krishna to him. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraces him very wholeheartedly. And seeing this, when his son goes back to Pratap Rudra, because he was being embraced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when Pratap Rudra embraces his son, he feels, wow, he also feels engladdened that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has embraced my son, and now I am able to embrace my son who's been embraced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this particular instance, there is a verse which is quoted by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which says how the son is actually the representation of the father. The verse is Angad Sambhavasi Hridayad Abhijayase Atma Vai Putra Namasi Sanjivas Saradaha Satam. This is from Brihadaranyakya Upanishad, and it says, you have taken birth from my various limbs and have arisen from my very heart. You are my own self in the form of my son. May you live through 100 autumns. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, this verse is quoted, and this is quoted by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So it says that how it is practically demonstrated when, even though he was not physically present, Pratap Rudra, but when his son was being embraced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, first Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bestowed his mercy on his son. And Pratap Rudra, when he embraces his son, he feels something special, different. There is another instance where we can see how the son represents the father, and it happens in this case of Romaharshana Sutta. Very interestingly, this episode in Bhagavatam talks about Romaharshana Sutta, who was blessed by all the sages who were eager to hear Srimad Bhagavatam with long life. And Romaharshana Sutta was sitting in that Vyasasana. In that arena, Lord Balaram enters. So Romaharshana Sutta felt at that point in time that probably there is no need to pay any respect or obeisances to Balaram, because he is seated in the Vyasasana. He didn't get out of that. And seeing that, Balaram just took a small grass, a piece of grass, and with that he beheaded him, right? Because of his improper behavior. As they say, pride comes before a fall, right? But interestingly, when he did that, at that point in time, there was a conundrum which needs to be solved, because the sages had blessed him that he would live for a long time so that they could hear Bhagavatam from him. But now Balaram has beheaded him. So how would this continue? So they asked this question to Balaram, that how would this, now that the blessings that we have given, the benediction that we have given should not go wrong. And at the same time, you have beheaded him because of his improper conduct. That should also happen. So simultaneously, how is it possible? So very interestingly, this mystery gets solved when Balaram says that I will bestow the same blessings to his son. And that is how Suta Goswami, he gets all the qualifications to speak. The blessings of the sages continue with Suta Goswami, and he becomes the speaker, even though Romaharshana Sutta gets killed. Now, from all these instances that we are seeing, how the son is represented by, is a representative of father, what is it that we can learn for us? You see, the son also has a big responsibility to represent his father in the right way. If that is not happening, then it's a big problem. There is a good chance that a son of a Brahmana can become a Brahmana, the son of a Kshatriya can become a Kshatriya, provided he follows the right conduct. In the case of Aswathama, however, it's a disgrace. Right? That's why he's called Brahma Bandhu. Even though Dronacharya was very glorious, the act committed or the act performed by Aswathama was heinous. See, similarly, the same way, all of us who are telling ourselves that we are disciples of Srila Prabhupada, we have a big responsibility to represent him, because the spiritual master is our father. If we don't conduct ourselves properly, we bring disgrace to spiritual master. There are many aspirants who come and just take initiation for the sake of taking. They think like it's a formality, it's another thing that we have to do. And anyway we are grahasthas, or we are something, we are doing this thing, some conceptions in their mind. But what they don't realize is their conduct, if they are not mindful, if they don't properly take care of their conduct, behavior, commitments, they will bring disgrace, like in the case of Aswathama. So when we are practicing spiritual life, where the biggest mercy, apart from having gotten this human form of life, we have taken shelter of a pure devotee, we have an additional responsibility that we are representing our Acharya. So when we are representing our Acharya, it is very important to follow the rules and regulations given by the Acharya's sent person. And we have to have an ideal conduct where we carry ourselves as a nice devotee. Unless and until that is done, it brings disgrace to the spiritual master. Forget about disgrace. I mean, we are actually burdening a pure devotee by our conduct. So that's why, like yesterday I was also telling, it's very important to reflect what we hear. Reflection, if it is not done, if after Shravanam there is no Mananam, there is no reflection of what is going on, then the Nidhi Dhyasanam, where the change happens, will not come. We may go on hearing for years and years, for days and days, and it becomes a ritual, that hearing. We hear something which we like yesterday I was telling, there are 8 things which Krishna is telling. Pita, Mata, Dhata, Pitamaha, Vedyam, Pavitram, Omkara, Riksama, Yajurevacha. We go back remembering that much. But Mananam helps us to take the next step. When we reflect, when we introspect, and we see, okay, how many things I need to change in my life. I don't get puffed up. I don't take it lightly. I take it very seriously. And that seriousness brings the change in our action. And when that happens, when we speak to someone, the preaching is the last thing. When we walk the walk and talk the talk, and when we interact with somebody, it gets communicated. It gets communicated very easily, and people also take it very seriously. Otherwise, we will lack, the purity will be lacked, and we will also not enjoy our devotional life. These are some of the important points from this verse. Any question, any comments anybody has? Without being obedient to the spiritual master, it is difficult to practice brahmacharya. That's what Prabhupada writes in the purport. The act of obedience is the first sign that a person is ready to become disciplined. Because if you compare the material life and spiritual life, the difference is material life, people want to become independent. They want to do things unquestioned. Nobody should ask, just do it. I thought this is enjoyable to me, let me do it. Spiritual life begins when somebody becomes obedient, takes instructions and follows. That is how he becomes disciplined. When we take up to this path of spirituality, before even knowing about Krishna, or the tattva of Krishna and what is going back home, back to Godhead, it is important to know what does it mean to be Guru Pada Ashrayam. Like taking the shelter of the lotus feet of Guru, what does it mean? Obedient means to follow the instructions given by the spiritual master, 100%. Without having that, devotional life doesn't begin even. Like we are seeing this present example of Aswathama, right? In general. Disgrace means, we know, right, there are apparently so many disgraces in the history of ISKCON, right? People have deviated and all, and done so many things. How does it happen? Where is the root cause? The root cause is Guru Ravagya, right? Disobedience to the orders of the spiritual master. So that feeling that, I am now representing my spiritual master is a very powerful one. If somebody reflects really, my spiritual master is a pure devotee. When we get initiated, we feel so happy that I am taking shelter of a pure devotee spiritual master. But when it comes to our conduct, we don't pay so much of importance because we don't realize that we are representing our spiritual master. When that feeling comes, automatically some of the things that we do, we will not do. Because it is not just my action. My action is always driven by the three modes of material nature and the dictation of my mind and senses. But now, the spirit soul who is trapped in this body has accepted a pure devotee spiritual master. I am representing him. I have a big responsibility. I can't do some of the things which I've been used to or I've been conditioned to do. And that should be exhibited in our conduct. Does that help?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. It was said that a devoted wife is a man's better half, husband's better half. What is it? Is there anything that a husband can do to increase the chance of wife being devoted? Because then that person will become a better commander to protect him against the onslaught of senses.
I mean, the husband is considered to be the spiritual master of the wife, provided the husband is a devotee, right? As in the case of Kardama Muni, or as in the case of Puranjana, when she becomes Puranjani and then takes birth again, her husband was a devotee, and that is how she also takes up to this path of devotion. So it is like, how I can make a person more devoted is question. It's just the context is wife and husband, but in general, how do I make a person more devoted? So the one way answer of that is by our ideal conduct, by the way I conduct myself, by being an inspiration to the other person, showing by example that this is how it has to be led, a person follows. Every other thing, when somebody tries to impart the instruction in the form of little bit of dominating, will backfire. Especially in the Kali Yuga, where everybody has a very inflated false ego. To get the point across, to communicate that is very difficult. So an ideal husband should exhibit a lot of humility and ideal conduct, and by his ideal conduct he can transform the heart of his wife to take up to this more seriously. And then the wife compliments by being the commander and protecting the fort and all.
Krishna is testing the devotee's conduct, right? So here Krishna, is he testing Arjuna or Draupadi? Because here both their conducts we are discussing.
Yeah. So actually the point of reference is all Arjuna. Because it has been starting with Arjuna, that Arjuna has been asked to follow or asked to counteract the Brahmastra. He has been asked to bind Aswathama. If you see in the previous verses that we discussed, there was one verse, 1.7.40. And there is a word which is used for Arjuna in that verse. It is called Yadyapi Atmahana Mahan. Arjuna is addressed as Mahan. Mahan is very great. Arjuna is not some ordinary person. It is not like any one of us. Maybe there are some parallels we can draw, but Arjuna is very great. The sign of greatness does not lie if there are people around you who label you as great, Mahatma. No. The sign of greatness lies in how you conduct yourself. in life, when there are apparently similar kind of paths which are coming in our way, they both look almost similar. Which is the right decision to make? That's very difficult. And that can only come if somebody is very close or always engaged in devotional service, because in that case, he can hear the voice of Paramatma in the heart. Where is it mentioned in Bhagavad Gita? Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayantite. But the buddhi yogam, that dadami buddhi yogam, will only come tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. Satatam yuktanam, if somebody is always engaged in devotional service, bhajatam priti purvakam, with love, tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayantite. Otherwise it is very difficult, very difficult. Your question? Okay.
So, how do we understand, Prabhu, that Ashwatthama is still referred to as Brahma Bandhu in spite of all these activities, while he could have been called a Shudra or something lower than Brahma Bandhu?
Yeah. So, I don't know why we should think that Brahmabandhu is higher than Sudra. Brahmabandhu could be lower than Sudra also. You see, in there is a, I think there was, recently there was some, in one place, I think, I don't remember where, but I was having a discussion with few people. They asked me, you know, a Brahmana, if you call him Brahmana, he feels happy. A Kshatriya, if you call him Kshatriya, Rathor, very happy. Vaishya, if you call him Vaishya, he also feels happy. A Sudra, you go and tell him you're a Sudra, he'll not feel happy, right? You're a Sudra if you tell. He doesn't feel happy. Why? So, or for example, there was a politician who labeled the Sudras or the so-called untouchables as Harijan. Now, imagine somebody comes and tells me, Prabhu, you are giving so wonderful class. You are actually a Harijan. What will I say? What will I feel? That's because the people who label people, if they don't follow the injunctions of the scriptures, then that will create disturbance. Where it is mentioned? Shruti, Smriti, Puranadi, Pancharatrik, Vidhirvina, Akantika Harer Bhakti, Utpadeva Kalpate. If in one pointed this thing you are trying to do something without the conclusion of Shruti, Smriti and Purana, Utpadeva Kalpate, it's actually creating more disturbance. Actually, we are tiny, insignificant, but we can't take it like, the moment we are said, because, first of all, Kali Yuga products, so very high false ego. Harijan? Which angle you saw me as a Harijan, right? That kind of a feeling comes. But we are worse than Sudras. Fourth class people, Prabhupada says, not fourth, we are even worse than that. But in our mind, because, we are born in some sarma, this thing, that thing, we consider, no, I'm the Brahmana. By birth, we are not Brahmana. It's by only samskaras we become Brahmanas. Right? So, this comparison that Brahmabandhu or Sudra is actually irrelevant in one way. Brahmabandhu or Kshatrabandhus are considered to be worse than even Sudras. So, we may look like there is a Brahma or a Kshatra, maybe it is better, but there is still Bandhu makes it worse than Sudra, the fourth class people.
Prabhu, so in a practical life situation similar to what Draupadi is saying, we see also a situation where there is something known as course correction that we want the other person to take, and sometimes the empathy and compassion that we were talking about. So how does the balance come about, and how does one see this in real situations that may come?
Yeah, so that's why the guidance is required. Without guidance, whether I have to do course correction or I have to show compassion, I will not be able to distinguish myself. Sometimes in the name of compassion, I can get driven, I can get carried away, and it has happened many a times. Even in our movement, some of the devotees who show compassion on some people, don't even realize that, the cost of going away from their ashram, going away from living in a brahmachari life to help another person, because it is something as per their mind it is not done right. So to draw the line, how much of compassion to shown and where to do the course correction, one has to have that obedience to listen to our authorities. The problems in you cannot be seen by you very easily, but the problems in you can be seen by others very easily. It's like you are standing before, they're like your mirrors. There are many parts of our body, what's going on in my eyes or what's going on somewhere here, I don't know. But somebody who's standing in front of you can see everything, all parts of your bodies. Same holds true. In an association of devotees, especially devotees whom you are reporting to or who are senior to you, if they are saying something, don't just feel agitated or irritated. The first thing is, because material world, we don't like our bosses. That mentality we carry here also in the spiritual world. Kya bol diya mere ko? So the moment that paradigm comes, then the course correction can never happen. Because our mind and intelligence will justify always saying that whatever action I am taking, whatever decision I am making, that is the best decision. But when we have that attitude of listening, because this is a spiritual organization, this is different from material, the way material organization works. Then I can know, really, yeah, there is a value in this, I should correct myself. Otherwise, I'll remain confused. Okay, if no question, we'll stop here. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai